As I already mentioned that operative part is the principal and main objects of a legal instrument. Antecedent, habendum, exception, reservation, covenant, all are different types of terms and conditions of the legal instrument. Therefore, the question will arise, what are the essential elements of a valid contract? Are, or what are the terms we need to specify in our legal instrument? Here we will consider all the essential elements of a valid contract, and you have to indicate all these informations in your legal instrument. First element is offer and acceptance. Basically, a contract unfolds when an offer by one party is accepted by the other party. The accepted offer should be without any qualification and be definite. An offer needs to be clear, definite, complete, and final. It should be communicated to the offeree. A proposal, when accepted, becomes a promise or agreement. The offer and acceptance must be consensus and idem, which means that both the parties must agree on the same thing in the same sense. That means identity of wills or uniformity of minds. Therefore, in your term, you should include the name of the offeror and the offeree, and on the other hand, include the name of the acceptor or acceptee. Second part is intention to create legal relation. The intention of the parties to a contract must be to create a legal relationship between them. Agreements of social nature, as they do not contemplate legal relationship, are not contracts. For instance, if a father fails to give his daughter the promised pocket money, the daughter cannot sue the father because it was purely a domestic arrangement. Thus, it is clear that all agreements which do not result in legal relations are not contracts. Therefore, the terms must show that there is an intention to create legal relationship between the parties. Next part is capacity to contract. We already discussed these topics in our last videos. If an agreement is entered between the parties who are competent enough to contract, then the agreement becomes a valid contract. But it is not necessary to indicate any information regarding competency of the parties, especially age, in this operative part, because it is necessary to mention in the non-operative part. Free consent is another essential element of a valid contract. An agreement must have been made by free consent of the parties. The contract would be void in case of mutual mistakes. When consent is obtained by coercion, undue influence, fraud, or misrepresentation, the contract would be voidable, and the terms of the legal instrument must indicate that the parties have full consent when they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. Next point is lawful object. Objectives of the agreement should be lawful. It must not be illegal or immoral or opposed to public policy. It is lawful unless it is forbidden by law. When the object of a contract is not lawful, the contract is void. Next point is lawful consideration. Something in return is consideration. In every contract, agreement must be supported by consideration. It must be lawful and real. Therefore, the terms of the legal instrument must specify the value and passes from one party to an agreement to the other for binding each of them to any particular promise or promises, which culminates in a contract. The value may be expressed in terms of promise to do something or forbearance from doing something. For example, A wants to sell a land for Taka 80 lakhs. B promises to buy the land for Taka 80 lakhs. The promise to pay Taka 80 lakhs from B is the consideration for the promise to sell the land by A. When the parties agree to these terms in their legal instruments, the contract becomes enforceable. Finally, you should remember the agreements in which the meaning is uncertain, or if the agreement is not capable of being made certain, it is deemed void. Therefore, terms and conditions of the contract of the legal instrument should always be certain and cannot be vague. The terms of the agreement of the legal instrument must also be capable of performance and should not enforce impossible act. This is a format of legal document for sale contract for the operative part. It is just a sample. As we already knew that for operative part there are three sections: testatum, habendum, exception, reservation, covenant. Now this deed of sale witness that can be considered as a testatum. For habendum, you can write in this way: the seller shall transfer of the property in the name of the seller to the purchaser, and the purchaser has paid to the seller the total sale consideration Taka 80 lakhs as a full and final payment against the said property. After that, the purchaser will hold the absolute ownership in possession and title of the said property. And last part will be exception, reservation, covenant. Basically, you have to write all the terms and conditions in this operative part. Formal part is the last part of the essential of deed. There are three parts of formal part. Number one, the testimonium. This set forth the fact that the parties have signed the deed. It usually begins with the words in witnesses whereof the parties aforesaid, namely, have hereunto set and subscribed their signature on the day and year just above mentioned in the presence of the witnesses. Please remember, if the date of execution of the deed has not been given in the beginning, or if you want to give another date, then you can replace the words of the day and year just above mentioned and can include the words this day of dash are to be submitted. Number two, signature and attestation. Immediately following the testimonium, the parties put their signatures. Thereafter, the witnesses put their signature, and if the deed requires attestation, then the executant must sign in the presence of the witnesses, and the witnesses must sign in the presence of the executant. In such case, after the signature of the executant, the following words are written: signed by the above named parties in our presence, and we have signed in their presence. After, the witnesses will do or will put their signature. Last part, but it is the most important part for a deed, which is related with the immovable property only. that is parcel of description of the property. Sometimes it is known as schedule of property. In this part, the property is described in detail, accurately and correctly, either at the foot of the deed, before testimonium, or schedule annexed to the deed. The object of the description is to make the property easily identifiable. Sometimes a plan to attached and made part of the deed. Some guidance in this respect may be taken the provision of Section 21 and Section 22 of the Registration Act 1908. According to the Section 21 of the Registration Act 1908, the property should be described in sufficient details so as to make the identity thereof easier. For example, houses in towns shall be described as situate on the north or the other side of the street or road, which should be specified to which they front, and by their existing and former occupants, and by their numbers if the houses in such street or road are numbered. Therefore, Section 21 of the Registration Act 1908 explains the description of the property and maps or plans. Section 22 of the Registration Act 1908. According to the Section 22 of the Registration Act 1908, it is necessary to refer government map or survey for description of houses and land only for those houses which are not being housed in town.